decided to invite, today is Bring Your Daughter to Work Day, and I invited my daughter Kim to join me, and we could tell you about relapse from the inside out. And Kim was willing to come on and for us to talk about the relapses that she's had, but we're gonna focus on the last one. And relapse is part of the disease of addiction. Now, not everyone relapses. My husband had 32 years of sobriety and he never relapsed. And some people do. And some people are chronic relapsers. Would you say that that's the category you fell into?
Yes.
Okay. I don't want to speak for her, but I was right along the side of her, So, relapse and alcoholism or drug addiction or any addiction is about people stop doing the routine. They stop doing what it takes to recover. And I was talking to someone the other day and they said they had a good year of sobriety. They did everything that we told them to do and they got happy and they did, loved life. And then the next thing they knew, they were too busy to do all those things because their life grew and it grew. And so they quit doing all those things. And the next thing she knew is that I'm touching Kim, she's moving her leg. So the next thing she knew, she was in relapse. And so that is how the American Medical Association decided and deemed alcoholism a disease, is because a disease has to have a relapse component to be known as a disease. So addictions definitely has that relapse component. So who's affected by relapse? Absolutely the addict is affected, but the family is affected also. So I thought that, in talking with Kim, what we thought about doing, or I asked her if she would be willing to do this, is to talk about her last relapse. And then how it affected the two of us, because families are very, very much affected, and we play a role in it. And that's why we must have our own recovery. So we had just finished, or we were filming the OWN Network docuseries, and that's been how many years?
Nearly 15.
Nearly 15 years. It was a very hard thing to do. It was a lot of work. It was constant. It was, it was fulfilling. I'm glad we did it, all of that, but it was a hard time. And one morning we were walking out to the cottage to go to group, and Kim was in front of me. Kim is like her mother. She has more than one addiction, and eating disorders being one that we have in common. And Kim was walking in front of me, and I did a confrontation, and I said, Kim, when I see you losing weight, what I think is that you're back into your anorexia, and I couldn't even get past that. She said, stop it, Mother, get back in your own hula hoop. It's none of your business. But so that was the first indicator that I had about that she was off track, was the weight loss. I had no earthly idea about anything else. So we completed the show, and then it was in October, and I was scheduled to speak at a conference. I've been there several times in Kentucky, it was my oldest daughter's birthday week, and I invited her to go with me. I said, we'll just go to Nashville, spend the night, have some fun, rent a car, and drive into Kentucky. She said, great, let's do that. So we did that. We had a wonderful time, and she was driving, and the next morning we started out to Kentucky. And she looked over at me and she said, Mother, Kim's in relapse. And I said, what do you mean she's in relapse? I said, I've noticed she's lost some weight. She said, no, she's in big time trouble. She's relapsed in everything. And I couldn't comprehend it. I said, pull over the side of the road and tell me about this. So she did. And I was shocked. I was absolutely in shock because I had been working with her every day. And so we went on to Kentucky, and then, I had to get up the next morning and go present at this conference. And so we got to the hotel, and I remember laying across the bed and sobbing, those deep, deep, deep sobs, to the point that I didn't know if I could come out of it. I mean, it was just like the bottom fell out. And so I did what I've been taught to do. I called my beloved friend and sponsor, and since then she has passed away, but I talked to Kathy. She was a physician in Atlanta, and she knew a lot about the disease from the inside out. And she told me, she said, what you need to do is call Kit, who is a therapist friend in Memphis. She said, you need to do an intervention on Kim and send her to treatment. Because when we're in that state of mind, I teach this stuff, but I could not think of one thing that I needed to do other than lay across that bed and cry and pray and shout. And so she said, call him right now. So I did. I hung up the phone and I called Kent and I told him the deal. And I said, I have no idea where to send her. And he said, I do. He said, let's schedule it. And I was getting back on Sunday, and Kim and I were starting an intensive that day. He said, go ahead and do the intensive, and I'll be there on Friday at the end of it. And so what that gave me was a week or 5 days. What I did that 5 days is I just loved on Kim. I just loved on her. Her family did. She had no idea what we were planning at all. And so at the end of the workshop, she got ready to leave. She was meeting some friends in town, and I said, Kim, would you wait just a minute? Well, Karen and Kent, who was the interventionist, was in another building, and they were waiting till all the clients left and they were coming in. And so I asked her if she would wait a few minutes. So I'm going to turn it over to her and let her give you her response. Kim, you're on.
Do you want any past history, or do you want me to continue?
This is your deal.
All right. Hi everybody, I'm Kim. The first time I was in AA was in 1986. And if I had stayed sober, I would have 40 years, and I don't have that time. And I would get clean in alcohol, but I would be practicing another addiction. And I believe that if we're not clean in everything, it's hard to live in recovery because our mind is still altered, and I had a lot of addictions. And I would get clean and I'd be like, okay, I'm doing good. And then I would use another thing, and then the whole relapse stuff. It would be like I would relapse, the guilt and shame, all of that. And then I would just keep doing it. And I don't know how many times I've come back, but I think this last time was the one that saved me, So take it up to that day, I was in relapse in everything, and I was planning on hanging myself in my house. Because addicts are pretty dramatic, you know, and I thought, okay, I'm going to take myself out on the same day that I was born, whatever. That's just how we are. So I was planning on hanging myself in my house because I was tired. I was tired of the lies. I was tired of the games. I was exhausted, mentally exhausted, and trying to keep everything where nobody would know, you know, and we are good at that. We are good at keeping it to where nobody knows. And so that day, and Tennie said, okay, Kim, hold on a minute. And I thought, oh no, something's up. I could just feel it. You know, I just knew. And about that time, Karen walked in the door and Kent, and I thought, my first thought was I can outrun everybody in this group, and I can run down the street, and I can get in my car, and I can leave. And then what hit me was, that's what I've done all my life, is I've run. And every time I ran, I went with me. And all my stuff went with me, you know. And so I said, okay. And I started to tell the truth and what was going on. And they had me a plane ticket, and everything in my life was a mess. My house was a mess. My job was a mess. My relationships with my family, everything. And the guilt and shame, I don't know why I'm crying.
It's hard.
But the guilt and shame, you know, one more time, you know, Kim has to go get help. But the biggest thing about it is I said yes, and I wanted help because I didn't want to die anymore. You know, I was dying. I was literally dying, and I was willing to hang myself just to make the pain stop, and the shame stop, and the guilt stop. I mean, so I had 2 hours to pack, and I was like, I don't know, just throw it all in. I don't know, you know. I was a little mad, but I wasn't gonna. But I was very grateful. But I didn't want to let anybody know yet that I was grateful because I wanted to be kind of hateful first. And I had lost trust of everybody in my family. I mean, the family was devastated. Every one of them. Because they had no idea. And I knew me saying I'm sorry didn't mean anything to anybody in my family. It didn't mean anything. Because I had said that before. You know, it didn't mean anything. So I got on that plane and I got out, and it was Halloween, October the 31st, 2000, Halloween. Who goes to treatment on Halloween? Anyway, whatever. And I was so humiliated and humble at the same time, you know. And I was, there were these young girls there. I'm so glad you're here in treatment, and you know, and it's Halloween. Do you want to dress up? And I was like, please get away from me, you know. And I started. I was not allowed. Well, a few of my siblings didn't want to hear a word that came out of my mouth. I don't care. You can go up there and stay the rest of your life. You're not coming back here. I don't care. We're done. I mean, and I knew they were done. I knew they were done. And so I started treatment. I was in on a unit for professionals, impaired professionals, which I was very grateful for, because as a therapist, it's like another shame. I should know all of this, I should know. I know what to do. I just didn't do it. And there were 20 people in my group, and out of the 20, I'm the only one that is still in recovery. And I went in and I found out, it's not about my mother anymore. I mean, I tried my entire life to blame her. It's not about my mother anymore, or my dad, or my family, or whatever. It's on me. It's about me. It's about me not following through with anything that I've done. It's about me. And I learned, I really got it. Like, I have a disease. I'm not the disease. I have a disease. And it's treatable. And there's a lot of stuff on my end that I have to do. I can pray all day and ask God to relieve this, but I got to get up and I got to take some action. Tennie always says, we take action and God blesses our effort. So I went through treatment, and it was hard, and I learned, and I wasn't able to talk to my family because none of them wanted to talk to me except her. And I got to talk to my dad, I think, once. And I wasn't allowed back here after treatment. I lost my job and my car and my house, and I lost everything, and I got my life back. I got it back. So I wasn't allowed back here. I was told, you're not coming back because we don't trust you. And I wasn't trustworthy. And so I went into a halfway house, and the show had just aired on the Oprah Winfrey Network. And I was in a halfway house, and it was cold, and it was in New Mexico, and then it got hot, and it was real hot in New Mexico, and I didn't have a car, and I had to go to meetings, and I got a sponsor. And I didn't have a car. So I walked, and I got on the bus one day, and I didn't know how to ride a bus, and I was too embarrassed to ask somebody. So I'd get on the bus, and I'd ride around town on the bus because I was so embarrassed. I had so much shame. But I started working the program, and I got better, and I had sponsors, and I didn't have just one, I had a whole group of them. Because when I was in treatment, I said, I'm going to find the sweetest, oldest, nicest sponsor that I can find. Because I knew I could get some stuff over on her. And they said, They said no. And I had like 5 of them, and like I would call one, and I'd be like, well, I was thinking, and they'd say, no, Kim, and they'd hang up on me. So I'd call the other one, well, what do you say? No, Kim, because it was my thinking that got me there. I'm going to kind of wrap up on this, but so I got out, and I was in the halfway house, and I had to find a job. Well, I had been a therapist for 30 years, and I didn't have a car. And I was like, I just need a job. I need something to do. And I would, like, I begged loads. I said, I will count nails, whatever. I just needed, well, you're overqualified. I just needed a job. So I applied for a job on Craigslist, and it was for electrical locator. And I had no idea what it was, but I'm an alcoholic and I acted like I knew what it was. And I had to look it up to find out what it was. They hired me. I got it, and it came with the truck. And what it is you go out, and when people are about to dig or whatever, you go out and you mark where the electric lines are in the ground, and you throw a flag on it. You have a little tool. So that's what I did for 2 years. And I went to meetings. And I listened to my sponsors. And there would be times I would be out in the middle of the desert doing a job, and just the shame would hit me. You know? And then I would turn right around and I would say, thank you, God, that I'm here in the middle of the desert. That I'm still alive, you know? And when I work the steps, you know, and there's a step in there where you have to make amends to people. And I was like, what do you say about a lifetime of lies? You know, and I had a sponsor that talked to me that said, you know, how many times have you said you're sorry? And I said, my entire life. I'm sorry. Well, you know, and then I believed I was. And so what she talked about was making amends is about mending my behavior. It's about doing it different. It's about becoming a different person. You know, I was never accountable or responsible. Ever. Ever. Was I?
Don't get me
Ever.
right.
You know, I became accountable and responsible. I followed through with my word. I kept my word. You know, I told the truth. And I did this job, and I was at a meeting every day, and I finally got my own apartment there. First time I was self-supporting by my own contributions. You know, my mother came up when I had a year, and she said, well, what would you like for your birthday? Because my AA birthday is the 31st of October, and my belly button birthday is the 4th of November. So she said, what would you like for your birthday? And I don't know what she thought I would say, but I said, I need a warm comforter and some groceries. She was like, wow. You know, and that's growth. I didn't want or need anything else. And so my dad was getting sick, and I really wanted to see him before, I was afraid he would pass away when I was in treatment, but he didn't. But anyway, I was finally allowed back here, you know, and I know Cam's on here, and I had many discussions with Cam about my role and my not role. You know, I would have a role, and and I started out when I came back, and I wrote a contract with Shades. And I think I followed, well, no, I don't think, I know I followed through with it. I started out maintenance. I mowed the yard, picked up sticks, painted, repairs, you know, anything. If there was trash on the ground, I picked it up. Because I was grateful. You know, I remember I had to go get some paint, and Christy gave me a blank Shades of Hope check, and she signed it, and I started crying because she trusted me with a blank check, you know. because I became trustworthy. Thank you. And I came back here, and yeah, and I don't even, I talk with clients about relapse, and I talked last night in a class I'm in that relapse is part of recovery, you know, and and that we need to know that it's not about failure, you know, because as addicts, when we don't follow through and we feel like we have failed, it just packs that stuff up. And I'm not saying that it's okay to relapse, but it's like it's part of it. It's part of it. And you know, in October I will have 15 years, which is absolutely mind blowing. Mind blowing, you know, and I'm doing stuff today in my life that I never dreamed I would be doing. I'm about to graduate from graduate school with honors. I'm pretty smart. When you're sober, you kind of have a brain, you know, whatever. I mean, I'm doing those things. I'm learning. I'm giving back. I'm helping other people. I give. Yeah, I give. And Tennie and I in the family have talked and a lot about it, and I never knew what they went through in my relapse, in this last relapse. I never knew, you know, and it's hard to hear, you know, what the family goes through, but I needed to hear it, and I've heard it from each one in the family, and it's like they're no longer a part of my disease as long as I'm using, and they really want to be a part of my recovery. Even the energy in saying that, they really want to be a part of my recovery, and they are. We're all in recovery, and we're all a part of it, you know. And I don't know. That's all I got, ma'am. And I get to work with her.
So, Virginia Satir is considered the grandmother of family therapy, and she's the one that gave us the 4 roles that children play. Now, if there's 4 children, those roles are just really identifiable. If there's 2, they're 2 children, they'll play 2 roles. If there's 1 child, they play all 4 roles. And this is children coming out of alcoholism or really any dysfunctional type of family. Because it's almost like the kids get together and divide the roles up. So there's the hero child, and that was my oldest daughter. Now, Kelly, my son, is the oldest, but he was the golden child, and his mother put him up on such a pedestal. And we all did. I mean, he would make the girls iron his clothes. They would willingly do that. You know, I would iron them, but if there was one little wrinkle, he wanted them out. I'd ride his hair every morning before he went to school. When he went off to college, he got his hair cut because he couldn't take me with him. I mean, he was up on a pedestal. He's also the one that played that mascot role. He was cute, precious, and darling. And, you know, so, and, you know, a lot of times the mascot never grows up. And, you know, he's grown up, but he still has that part of him. He's doesn't party like he used to. But anyway, so the hero child is the one that makes the family look good, and that was our oldest daughter, Karen. And she excelled at everything. Anything she did, she excelled. And my handprint was on her back. I pushed her to the nth degree. You know, we were big 4-H'ers, and my husband and I both were 4-H leaders if I could keep him sober long enough. But anyway, but we did. We had wonderful memories in 4-H, and the addiction tagged along with us, and the addiction was always there. So there is an award given in 4-H. The top award, really, it's called Gold Star Boy or Girl. Well, Karen decided she wanted to try out just to practice when she was 13. This is a county-wide honor, and she won at age 13. And it's because, she could describe her summers is listening to the kids being outside playing while she was doing 4-H record books, and me standing there, I guided her because she made us look so good. She's the one that got her name in the paper and, all that. So there's a lot of pressure with that. The hero child is the one also that helps the enabler, the chief enabler, who's usually, it's either the husband or the wife in this, situation. It was me. I was the enabler to my husband. And so the hero child usually teams up with the chief enabler, and she helps the enabler do whatever she can to help the alcoholic. Each child has a role. And so when the second child is born, well, in our case, it was the third, when Kim was born, usually that child looks around and they don't want to be perfect, and they see it's not getting that one, anywhere. So they go the opposite way, and they become the scapegoat. And that's what happened with Kim. She was the scapegoat. And for years after she graduated from school, if I heard of anything that was happening at Wiley's school, any acting out, my first thought was, wonder if Kim's leading that. I wonder what Kim did, because it was always Kim. My focus was Kim. It was, I started taking her to a therapist when she was, I said 2, she wasn't that young. She was about between 4 and 5. The first words that she uttered was mama, and she stuttered, and she had every type of acting out that a child could have. She was an acting out child, and if you've never had one, be grateful. Be grateful for the child not to have to go through that. Be grateful for yourself. It is a full-time job. By the grace of God, I found Al-Anon in 1968, October of 1968. My youngest was a bed baby, and but I found Al-Anon, and I was far sicker than my husband. Yes, he was an alcoholic, but I was nuts. He would get drunk and I'd go crazy. And, I kept a spotless house. I ran the house like a staff sergeant, and I wanted everything to look good, and it did. And we looked good out in the community. But Kim paid the price. Kim is the one, I always say, Kim is the one that got us help. You'll get help for a child a lot of times when you won't get help for yourself. And that's, Kim and I made the rounds of every therapist at Abilene. We've done the deal. And so when I was going to meetings a lot of times, if I went to night meetings, I would get a babysitter, the girl next door, but she wouldn't keep Kim. So I would have to take her to meetings with me. You're not supposed to take kids to meetings. But she met all the old timers in the meetings. She would go to their birthdays. She was well known in AA when she was 8 years old. So Kim and I have had quite a journey together. And as I grew in Al-Anon and quit enabling her, I kept putting the problem back on her. And but her dad was, he sobered up in 82. He was a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous, but he loved and adored Kim, and he enabled her. So that gave me a chance to be the one that didn't have to. So I knew that I could be real rigid and no, I'm not going to give you any money. No, I'm not going to bail you out of jail. No, because I knew her dad would come along and do it. And so when she had her last, really last breakdown, I actually was in treatment and she in LA and she tried to kill herself here. The therapist here called out there and wanted to send her to LA. They didn't ask me about it. Dr. Hollis came on the ward, on the floor on Sunday. She never came on Sunday, but she wanted to see me, and she told me the story that my daughter tried to kill herself, and she was on her way to California to go through treatment. And I threw a hysterical fit. I said, I have never done anything for myself. It's always been I was somebody's mother, I was somebody's wife, somebody's daughter, somebody. Had taken care of people all of my life. Kim came from a long lineage of alcoholics on both sides of the family. So I had a wide harvest. I had a lot of people to enable and take care of. And I became a chief enabler. But I was finding help and I was in treatment for my eating disorder. Once I calmed down, I was all right. They brought her in that Sunday, and she refused help. We were in an old psych ward, and she wanted over there with the mental health clients because she wanted the pills. She would not do any of the work. So, long story short, they discharged her, and this is one of the first biggest steps I ever took. She was 21 years old, failed out of college. She was back home. We had a younger daughter still at home. And Christy started lying for her and taking, filling in the blanks for her and all. And it was disrupting the household completely with Kim being there because there was no recovery. She was 21 years old. She would not mind. She wouldn't do nothing, zero, except what she wanted to do. So I knew we were going to have to ask her to leave our home. And it took us a week to find her before we could ask her because she was couch hopping with friends or whatever. But my husband and I could never get on the same page. But we laid in the bed one night and held hands, stayed awake all night and prayed, and he finally agreed to ask her to leave the home. So what I did is I planned her a dinner party, invited our recovery friends and her siblings, and we had this red plate that says "You're special," and she got to eat off of that. And so we invited her to leave our home. And we took all the locks off the doors. And, this sounds like it would be easy to do. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life to ask my kid, who was in so much trouble, to leave our home. But we were not helping. We were hindering her recovery. And it took a while for her dad to make the decision to ask her to leave. So it was a long process. And I remember when earlier, when Christy came, Christy was what we call the lost child. See, I had not even gone as far as finishing those 4 rows because the lost child gets lost in everything. The lost child is the one, if you want to know what's going on in a family, ask the lost child because they're not going to be saying anything. They've learned by watching. But if you want to know anything, they have the information. And they usually spend a lot of time in their rooms with animals or with phones, computers. They're readers, they're isolationists. So she was 13 years old. If there was ever a perfect child, and I didn't need to put that on her, but she was. She was absolutely never made a bobble. She was smart like Karen. All of our kids were smart, and even Kim made good grades in spite of her acting out. They all made good grades. But Christy was a superb, all of them, the girls were good softball players. So one summer she was asked to play on this adult or kind of an adult team because she was so good. And she came in one night, long story short, she had drank with those women after the game. My baby, my 13-year-old perfect child, had drank a beer, you know. So she stood in the hallway of our house and she said, well, Mother, in this house, if you don't have a problem, you don't get any attention. I'll tell you, that's the lost child speaking. So I'd like to say today that the girls are all in good recovery. They all go to their own meetings. They have sponsors. Christy's sponsor got us to work the steps together. If you want to do some hard work with your kids, work the steps with it. Come down, you're all the same. Now, we all can teach the steps. We teach them. But when you're working them with your adult children, it's a different story. And so we're up to step 9, and we're going to get back. We've had a break in the meetings, but we're going to get back. And we've got in the process of writing a book about mothers and daughters in recovery. Ann Lamont is a good friend that Christy and I met on a cruise, and she's helping us with the book because she says it's something that needs to be out there, that people can be severe addicts, but people can recover, whole families can recover. So relapse is not the worst thing in the world. What is the worst is never coming out of it, because this disease is a killer. It is going to kill people, whether you're eating it, drinking it, snorting it, shooting it up, whatever. It's a killer disease, and recovery is the only option. And we believe it's a spiritual problem, and there must be a spiritual healing. I love to see the faith sweatshirt there, because that's what you have to have, is faith that you can recover. And sometimes we have to borrow other people's faith. We don't have any faith, and we have to borrow other people. I'll tell you, my sponsors and good friends, I had 5 grounded people, women in recovery that helped me, walk me through Kim's last relapse. All 5 of them are gone. All 5 of them have passed away. That's a lonely walk. That's a lonely walk. So next week I'm going to be talking about friendship, and I'm going to be talking about how you find a friend. You don't have to stay hung out at your house and feel sorry for yourself. You got to get out there. You got to get out there and meet people. And so I'll be telling that story next week. But I want to open it up to anyone that would like to share. And I want to thank Kim for coming. I asked her if she would. We could talk about a lot of what we went through. And one of the hardest things was I had to, she went to an open AA meeting, or the open door AA meeting one Saturday night, about 200 people there. She took a gun, and with her intention, she was going to get up on the podium and say, "This is what AA has done for me," and shoot herself at the AA meeting.
But they didn't call on me, so.
So it saved her.
Just kidding.
So my dear friend, who is passed, she called me and she said, "Tennie, Kim is in trouble," and she told me what was happening. So it was on a Saturday night. I called suicide prevention team, and the guy that answered, I had trained him in the alcoholism field, and I said, "I want you to treat me like someone that doesn't know anything, because I don't know anything. Will you guide me on what to do about my daughter threatening to kill herself?" And she did. Suicide runs in our family. I had this obsession to kill myself, so she came by all this natural. But anyway, her dad hesitated to participate. He finally did. And, his father died in the hospital we were going to send her to, a state hospital. I put my mother there when I drove her from Odessa to Big Springs, Texas, and admitted her to a state hospital when I was 13, wasn't supposed to be driving. So it was like sort of our I can't say it.
Alma mater.
Yeah, we knew Big Springs State Hospital well from the inside out. And I got willing to admit my daughter. And when it came right down to it, my husband would not sign the papers. He wouldn't, so I signed them. And what'd you tell your dad? Go ahead, tell him.
I have to bleep me out. No.
What'd you tell him? What she told her dad is
to hide her, because when I got out, I was going to kill her for admitting me to a state hospital.
And I would do it again. I needed to get her somewhere where she was safe, and so and had it not been for Al-Anon, I could not have done that. I could, I enabled my daughter, I enabled my husband. I almost killed both of them by loving them to death. The AAs would say, you're keeping your husband and your daughter and your mother 1 inch away from recovery. They said about the time they get down there to surrender, you rush in and rescue them. Al-Anon taught me not to rescue, not to go out and rescue my family. And I quit. I took hands off. And it wasn't easy. It wasn't, because we love our addict family. We love it. But I knew I was killing my daughter one day at a time. So anyway, I want to open it up, and if y'all have anything to share or any questions you might want to ask us, we would be glad to answer them. Who would like to start?
Well, can I say one thing?
You can say
about. You want to drink my water?
Oh, excuse me.
About relapse is if you're watching this and if you're currently in relapse, I know what you're going through. I know the shame and the guilt and all of that. And the biggest gift that you can give yourself is to reach out to somebody else, because the more you stay in the relapse, the worse it gets. And there's people out there that understand, and yeah, and you're not alone. So that's all I wanted to say.
Yeah. One of the things that we've put together here is because Karen and Kim both have private practices, when people not everyone needs inpatient treatment. And so when we get calls of people in trouble, what we say is get detoxed, see one of the therapists here because they know what our program's like, maybe 2 weeks leading up to an intensive, and then come in and do an intensive. And Kim and Karen and I still do them. We do the intensives. That is a big piece of work. That gets to that core pain, and that's what people are relapsing over. It's the core pain that was never resolved. And so maybe they've had years in and out of the program. But until you get to that core pain and those deep-seated feelings and get some relief and some release from it, release and relief, you've got to have something to ease that pain. So they will see one of the, and I've seen some of them, but basically the two girls do, my 2 therapists do. And then they do an intensive, and then they follow up with one of the therapists. And that's been a really good package for people, because they're still, we've got a lot of sober people that are still sober after the intensive. Sometimes they drop off the face of the earth, but since we've put this together, we're seeing people get well. So that's your commercial for Shades today.